More than a month into the Yellow Vest demonstrations, prompted first by fuel hikes and austerity measures, the French Prime Minister has now owned up to the mistakes made by the Macron government that led up to weeks of violence and unrest across several French cities. French Prime Minister Eduoard Philippe acknowledged, quote, "We made mistakes. We did not listen enough to the French people. I remain convinced that they want this country to be transformed." Demonstrations in streets across France have peaked to record levels. Hundreds of protesters have been injured, and at least 7 have died since last month. Just last week, solidarity with the Yellow Vest extended to the General Confederation of Labor, one of the country's major unions, when they chose to launch a national strike. Now, with French politicians admitting mistakes and those in the streets standing firm for their demands, we're being joined now by investigative journalist and commentator Ben Swann to take a deeper dive into all of this. So, Ben, first, in your opinion, summarize for us what the Yellow Vest movement is all about.
You know, Manila, thanks for having me on. You know, we've been talking about this issue now for a month when these Yellow Vest protests first began, and a lot of folks don't even remember why they first started. They first started over a carbon fuel tax that was proposed by the French government. It was going to be imposed on diesel and fuel in order to help to fight climate change. And the problem is a lot of people, especially in rural parts of France, were very frustrated by this idea, saying that these policies were hurting them in their everyday lives. And so the protest kind of began from that, but it didn't stay with that. They grew, of course, out of that into a general sentiment from a lot of people in France that the government does not take care of the people, they're not listening to the people, and they're not instituting policies that are good for everyday people in France. So it's really grown out of that, and it spiraled into a much bigger issue, of course, than just fuel taxes.
And, you know, Macron has made an immediate concession to the protesters, several of them actually, such as abandoning that fuel tax plan and
That's right.
A number of other, I would classify as short-term fixes to address the problems, and like such as pay inequality. But now the Yellow Vests are pushing for more. At what point does Macron say, no, enough? Where's the line?
Well, I think the problem that he's running into right now is because there is no clear line. So Macron began by saying, as you said, some immediate concessions, but that really hasn't staved off these protests. And so his position now, and by the way, other European leaders as well, because we're now seeing in the Netherlands and in Brussels, and we're seeing in Germany, different European nations, the rise of other Yellow Vest groups where these protests are now beginning to spread. So it's not just staying in France. But I think the problem that Macron's running into and his administration's running into is this idea of popular referendum. And I think this is where the issue has now moved to. In the beginning, it was, okay, you're upset about fuel taxes. Give us some specifics you're upset about so we can make concessions. But it's not specifics, I think, that the people are really upset about. It's the lack of accountability and a voice in the process. Popular referendums are something that the French are now pushing for. They will probably see, and other nations in Europe may begin to see that as well. It's a truer form of democracy, but it's one that, especially if you're among the elite, you're not going to necessarily support.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up, because the French do have this tool in their democracy that we don't have. It triggers a referendum vote to be held if they have the backing of 1/10 of registered voters or 1/5 of backing from MPs. Does it appear that the French Republic could be heading in that direction for the first time ever?
I think it absolutely could be heading in that direction. But I think, again, this issue is larger than just France. So in France, we're beginning to see kind of the foothold of it. But I think what we're really seeing, and forgive the term here, because a lot of people get squirrely when you use the term globalism, but there is such a resistance right now to a globalist system that has been set up in Europe and in the United States, where a lot of people feel disenfranchised by that. Trade deals and the way the economies run, and a lot of how these G20 countries operate, many people within those countries feel like those governments are not responsive to the people. They're responsive to big corporations and they're responsive to other nations, but they're not responsive to their own people. And so I think what we may see out of this is an actual push across, not just in France, but across Europe to say popular referendum is the way to go so that people have more of a voice.
And you know what, Ben, while I still have you, I want to put this question to you that I did to George Galloway in the last hour. Speaking of the Yellow Vest movement, the BBC is trying to link the Yellow Vest movement to the Russian narrative. What say you on that topic?
It's so ridiculous. And it's not just the BBC. I mean, there have been a number of outlets that have done this. And if you look, listen, as you know, you got to look beyond just that initial headline. What is the claim that's being made? And the claim that's being made is that because RT and RT America and Sputnik report on the yellow vests, that this is now, because of that and because of tweets that have gone out, they are pushing this narrative. The idea here is simply that the Russians are causing this unrest. And when you do that, you make the grave mistake, in my opinion, of ignoring the fact that there is a very real, legitimate grassroots movement here of people who are saying, we are not being listened to by those in authority. If you try to blame everything on Russia and you ignore these people, you're going to see the protests build back up again and continue to spread as unresponsive governments look for an out.
All right, as always, love hearing your insights. My friend Ben Swann, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.